The 3DS is very slowly starting to feel a little bit more outdated, which is natural, and now more than ever, it needs something or some device to carry the torch and continue its legacy. And I think we might have gotten it. After months of ambitiously waiting, the AYN Thor has graciously delivered itself to my doorstep. Now, we're no stranger to dual screen devices. We've seen these things floating around the community with heavy price tags, but none of them are on the same mission as the AYN Thor. What we're about to dive into today is a device that is attempting to blur the gaps between original hardware and emulation. All of this coming in at a reasonable price tag that even rivals original 3DS hardware, which has gotten so expensive lately. I have finally found myself with a dual screen emulation device. I've been waiting years for this moment, so buckle up and get ready because we've got an intense fight ahead of us. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the dual screen Smackdown. I am your host, isaacOS, and today we've got one heck of a match. In one corner, it's the OG, the dual screen destroyer, the one who currently wears the crown, the 3DS. And in the other corner, the young gun, the modern maniac, the one with their eyes set on the throne, the AYN Thor. We've got a detailed fight ahead of us, build quality and design, software experience, and of course, emulation performance. Let's get into it. First off, I love this design. It's just so reminiscent of the original 3DS, but does look like it was brought into the modern era, but in the best way possible. It's not overly flashy. It looks like it has roots with a 3DS, but yet some things are obviously a little bit altered. If I didn't know anything about retro handhelds and then you just shoved this in front of my face, I would probably freak out and then like run to the bathroom and throw up in the toilet because I don't think I could process what I was looking at. It's very similarly sized to the original new 3DS XL, but just slightly chunkier on the bottom and slightly shorter in width. It's got a nice weight to it and ultimately feels pretty high quality, and the glass on the front does add to that premium feel and aesthetic as it's reflecting almost every light that comes into your room. I love the simplistic design here. There's no pie chart like there was on the Flip 2, which I don't know why Retroid added this stupid chart, so AYN hopefully took note of that and just gave us this clean design that does look like a long-lost sibling from the DS family of systems. And the buttons and controls are so good here. I understand now why so many people look forward to and continue to purchase AYN products specifically. The highest price tag I've ever spent on a retro handheld has been the Retroid devices, so this is my first time experiencing this. And they're basically the same as Retroids, to be honest with you. They have these nice Hall effect thumbsticks that feel buttery smooth. The D-pad is identical to that Retroid style D-pad that I've stated in several videos are my favorite because of how clicky but smooth it is to press down and do essentially any type of movement. But what actually stood out to me apart from every other device I've owned has been the face buttons. These buttons are such a nice blend between soft and squishy but still firm enough to feel satisfying to push down. They're not clicky at all like the DSi or the 3DS models, but yet they're not as mushy as the DS Lite's buttons. Now everything here does look very pretty and appealing to the eyes, but what's more important is the ergonomics and how the comfort is when holding the device. A lot of people online have been complaining or at least showing signs of worry when it comes to using the D-pad because it's located on the bottom side of the handheld. It's a bigger stretch for your thumb and just looks a little bit more awkward whenever you're using it. But from my experience with my medium-sized hands, I haven't found any problems when using the D-pad. It's obviously not the most comfortable experience. It would be better for D-pad use if it was on the top, but given the position of it, I haven't found any cramping or awkward, I don't know, feelings whenever I've been playing for a good stretch of time. The overall design is just so similar to DS models, so if you've got an original DS handheld and don't like the way that thing feels, then you're probably going to run into similar issues on this thing. But since I have so much muscle memory with DSs and 3DSs from my childhood, this feels right at home. The panels here are absolutely stunning, and it's even better that both of them are OLED. Top screen is 120 Hz, so things feel buttery smooth when navigating through or using BFI on retro games. And with all of this combined into one single folding clamshell device, I mean, we've got a pretty convincing argument against the OG 3DS. There are a few hiccups here and there. It's not a perfect device, and I have seen some frustrations with using it. Some people have been concerned about the all-glass front, and, you know, it is a fingerprint magnet, man. This thing just, as soon as you touch it, especially if you got like a black colored model, it's going to just look a bit greasy and smudgy over time, which does suck. But I'm kind of in the camp where if you don't get that color model, I prefer having this all glass front because it looks more premium and does feel less like a toy, which I usually like whenever my handhelds are either metal or have more glass on them, but that's just my own preference. The bottom screen tends to get pretty warm during some heavier emulation use. I leave the fan and performance mode on high performance, which mitigates most of the heat, but I still notice it getting relatively warmer on the bottom, which is a common issue for dual screen devices. But if you're super sensitive to heat on your device, you might think this thing's like a campfire. And as much as this thing clones the 3DS, the default viewing angle isn't the same as the 3DS, which doesn't make sense to me. Like, I would prefer it to be further back like the 3DS, so I don't know why. And I don't know how to articulate this any better, but instead of having issues on the left side where you would assume I'd have problems using the D-pad on the lower part of the device, I actually ran into more issues on the right side with my right hand. I'm not sure exactly what it is. Maybe it's the extra height of the device itself, or potentially the way that the shoulder buttons feel whenever you're resting your pointer finger on them, but I just found it to be the most uncomfortable over here. And lastly, what really bothers me the most about the entire design is just how flimsy the top screen feels. It's super fragile, and whenever I close it, I don't get nearly any satisfaction that I do on any other DS model. On this, I noticed that it feels more dainty, like I have to carefully close the top lid because I don't want to damage the screen. The software side of things had me spooked at first because this is a dual screen device, and Android and anything with two screens just seems like it's going to be way more confusing and complicated. But to my surprise, it was super straightforward. It's literally just two screens running Android, and depending on which one you're tapping and using at the moment, that's where the controls just follow. So I don't know, I didn't have any issues with it. AYN makes really great use of the bottom panel because they've implemented their own software with different types of access to helpful settings like the screen brightness. There's an audio mixer. You can turn off the top or the bottom screen completely, and just quick access to features that would be very, very useful on the fly. Now, since this is of course emulation, we have to decide on the multitude of front ends that we want to use in order to launch and play all of our retro systems and games. The main problem I found with all of the common culprits that we typically use, like Daijisho or ESDE or Beacon, is just the fact that these things don't really have dual screen support. There's nothing to display on the bottom screen. They only load up and work on whichever screen you launch the app from. Usually for me, I end up just launching it on the top, and then on the bottom you've got your display of all of your Android apps. The main issue with just using single screen front ends on this is that it doesn't feel like a complete or packaged console experience because, you know, one of these is running the front end, meanwhile the other is still just on your base home screen Android. Since this is a newer device, there's very few front ends that actually utilize both screens, but the most popular one that I've seen almost everybody who has an AYN Thor use is what's called console launcher. This is my first time using this front end, and it was pretty sweet. I mean, you've got a very polished experience. It utilizes both screens where you can see your games and emulators on the top, and then on the bottom it does display some type of image or even more box art from the game or icon that you're hovering over, which, like I said, brings things together because now both screens are in harmony and it's displaying the same exact thing. And I was going to use this thing as my front end of choice, but there's like this tiny black bar bar on the bottom that squishes the, I don't know, whatever's displayed there up a little bit, and it drives me insane, and I don't know why. This front end is still in beta, I believe, and they're constantly working on it, and they've done a great job, but this little thing, I don't know what it is, just bugs the crap out of me. There's also been a ton of noise for the front end called iiSU, which is in very, very early access stages, and I think they just got into the development stage. But this thing, judging by the release trailer, which isn't actually the software itself, this is essentially just the concept trailer for what they want it to look like. And whenever they made this, I don't think they had any code written at all, and it was just an idea. But now a ton of people have seen it, and they're jumping in to help create this Nintendo-esque looking front end that so many people, myself included, feel like is missing from this community. If the end product does end up looking like the concept trailer, I would totally jump on this thing, but we are nowhere close to that, it feels, yet. Which is why I ended up going with the trusty Daijisho for all of my front end needs. At first, it was super ugly and wasn't syncing with the bottom screen at all aesthetically, so I actually made custom wallpapers here to go with every single retro system that I wanted to personally use and throw up on my dual screen device. And then with the blank background that I used, it was kind of like a 3DS background, I shoved this wallpaper on the Android wallpaper for the bottom screen, so that way it actually looks like I'm in sync and I'm using the same app on both screens, even though I'm just using the front end on the top panel. I'll put this whole wallpaper pack in my Discord if you want to download them. I made them pretty fast in Photoshop, but if you want them, go ahead, go grab them. And the cherry on top is that dual screen emulation software like Azahar and Melon DS do launch properly, even though I've only got Daijisho working on the top screen. So I think this is great. It worked out sick, and I love the way that everything feels and has combined here on the software side. Okay, now for the main event, ladies and gentlemen, this is what I was waiting for as soon as I ripped this thing out the box. How does it handle and perform with 3DS and DS games? This is the entire reason why I even bothered to pick up this device in the first place, and it's the most important library that I want to test on this system. And while this isn't perfect emulation by any means, oh my goodness, did this give me a tingling sensation in an area that I cannot describe to you. 3DS with upscaled graphics now running on both screens on my very first dual screen device that looks like a 3DS. Woo! First thing I tried here was obviously Pokemon. I love Alpha Sapphire graphics. That's why I always include it in my videos. I think that this is the peak of 3D Pokemon besides the GameCube games. And like I said, with this being my first dual screen emulator, combined with the fact that I grew up with DS and 3DS games, I just couldn't stop smiling when I was playing this. So many different games looked and ran great on here, and finally, for the first time in my life, not having to smush the bottom and the top screen together or alternate screens when emulating was a dream come true. I did feel a little hint of nostalgia given the fact that I grew up with DS and 3DS machines. While it wasn't perfect and obviously didn't replicate that exact same feeling, I got a hint of nostalgia without a doubt. The game that truly sold things here for me on the Thor wasn't Pokemon though, it wasn't Zelda, it wasn't Kid Icarus, it was actually New Leaf. I opened this thing up expecting it to be nice, but the upscaled graphics and everything coming together was my favorite game by far to look at on the AYN Thor, and these didn't even have HD graphics or texture packs loaded in, it was just upscaled. Seeing these textures and how good this game looks just upscaled kind of made me freak out for a little bit, and I was just walking around a blank town impressed with how everything looked, even if there were a couple of graphical issues here and there. Overall, I couldn't really believe what I was looking at. DS is also an extremely similar situation, and once you get the emulator all good to go and apply an LCD shader within the settings, oh boy, we're just back to that same tingle. It really helps too that the Thor has a much better D-pad than all of the DS models combined, which makes for a really fun experience. The OLED panel making the saturation and colors pop while also having this giant proportionally scaled top screen for all DS games is a sight to behold. And speaking of aspect ratios, I really wish this bottom panel was 4:3, but I know that, you know, they don't really make 4:3 OLED panels, which is why we haven't gotten that in a device yet. And if If it was 4x3, then we wouldn't have black bezels on the bottom screen, and it would look so good, and we wouldn't have to stretch it out when we're playing DS games if you want to fill out the entire screen. And in Azahar, you don't even get the option to do that for 3DS, so we're still waiting on an update with the software to do that. But even with this being a problem, man, it's so hard to overlook how good OLED is with these games and how much it makes them come alive, even with these black bezels on the left and right or the top and bottom. I mean, just look at this thing compared to original models, dude. There's no beating the way that this looks. It's upscaled resolutions, the colors in the OLED screens, and now dual screen functionality to provide a decent bottom screen for whether it's your touch screen or whatever you want to do, kind of makes it hard to at least not take a look at the Thor. Emulation will never be the same exact thing as playing original cartridges, especially for, you know, newer-ish systems like the 3DS and even occasionally the DS. They're eerily close at times, but you will encounter a few graphical issues, texture glitches, and the occasional stutter here and there depending on the game. A really good example of this is just any DS Pokemon game. You can see these faint lines between textures sometimes whenever you're moving around, and depending on where you're at in the map, they kind of protrude out more. It doesn't affect the gameplay, and it's primarily happening because you're upscaling all of these textures, and it's just a result of emulation at the end of the day. The worst part about this is it does remind you that you're emulating. I think a lot of times my brain, when playing these games through an emulator, does sometimes fall for the illusion that, oh, this is the real game, I'm playing the actual game, and then a graphical issue or some type of texture has a bug on it, and it immediately hits back into my brain, oh wait, this is emulation, this isn't original hardware, which, you know, for some people it bothers them more than others. There's technically more input lag and latency on this thing as well, but it's kind of a non-issue unless you're playing a platformer. For 3DS in particular, I was pretty worried about input lag and what it would feel like when playing any type of platformer, but thankfully here the latency wasn't super noticeable. There's always going to be a delay and an increase in response time just because it is emulation, but the 120 hertz panel on the top helps counter that a little bit, and I was just surprised that it didn't feel that much far off from original hardware. Rhythm Heaven, for example, worked great on DS, and while it's not a resistive touchscreen, I still had a pretty good time. Speaking of touchscreen as well, I also bought this super cheap pack of styluses off of Amazon for $4.50. Now, if you've played a lot of DS games, this might feel kind of gross, but I did enjoy it, and I was able to play these games pretty normally. And once we dive into older systems, the emulation just gets even better. Every console released before the 3DS that has had proper software runs like a machine on this thing. PS1, N64, SNES, GBA, and despite even having black borders on these, the games still come alive. You can throw on black frame insertion thanks to the higher refresh rate of the panel, and then with the addition of some RetroArch shaders too, you can add on CRT Royale, which is like my go-to shader pack, and now you've got access to top-of-the-line emulation with a high-quality shader that's in a 3DS silhouette, which is still crazy to me. GameCube and PS2 are some of the most sought-after consoles to emulate, and the chipset here blazes through these games, and like I said, is the most powerful Android handheld that I've ever used, and I did notice the boost in performance for me personally. I throw up Dragon Ball Z BT3 on a lot of handhelds and notice some slowdowns, but here it was just passing with flying colors. Wii U is an interesting one because it's in theory something that should work really well with a bottom screen for that gamepad emulation, but since the software for Wii U emulation is relatively lacking, there's not a whole lot of games that are enjoyable experiences. What I found the most interesting about retro emulation on this specific dual screen layout is the fact that the bottom panel is still really good for playing games. You don't get access to BFI because it's only 60 hertz, but since this aspect ratio down here is closer to 4:3, most retro systems will actually look better on the bottom panel instead of the top because there's no bezels, or at least very, very minimal amounts of bezels. I'm pretty sure this is the same screen that was used in the Retroid Pocket Classic, which is my go-to device for any Game Boy or Game Boy Color emulation, and we're getting all of this essentially as an add-on or addition that's just thrown on the bottom. This is now the perfect setup. 4x3 retro systems on the bottom with basically no bezels, and then a YouTube video on the top playing whatever you want in 16:9 or whatever widescreen format. Now we get to happily fry all of our attention spans by doing so much more than what we originally intended. You know what? Let's just do it even more. Let's just like put the TV on in the background and make a PowerPoint on your laptop while watching YouTube videos while playing a 4x3 SNES game. And the list just continues, dude. Now we got Android games to throw in on top of this, and you can download them from the Google Play Store. But please, dude, do not buy this assuming you can use 2 thumbsticks comfortably. This is like the worst setup ever for using 2 analog sticks, so I had to throw that in there. And the most insane improvement, though, out of all of this isn't even just Android games, it's Game Hub. This is an app that lets you connect to your Steam account and then downloads certain Steam titles onto your Android machine. So now we get access to not only Android games and all of this emulation, but then you can throw on your Steam games and so many different indie titles that I would normally just play on my Steam Deck of all things, but I'm playing it on the 3DS. Like, dude, I don't know if you guys can understand. This is like, it's freaking blowing my mind. I don't know, this device, it's like, I've just been waiting so long on a dual screen handheld, and it's finally here. And now I'm just gonna shatter your brain even more here, okay? Not only can you do all of this gaming that I have been explaining to you and showing you, but on top of this, dude, you can download the freaking Kindle app and use this as an e-reader. I downloaded the Kindle app and then turned the device sideways, and I hold it from the bottom screen side with my thumb closer to the D-pad. This allows me to read a page normally on the top screen while changing pages with the bottom D-pad button. So now I've got not only a dedicated gaming device, but a somewhat functional e-reader, of course, without the e-ink display. And if you want to get even more into this rabbit hole, dude, you could use the bottom panel to load up like a notes app and jot down ideas or moments from the book that you like, or even throw on YouTube with some reading ambience in the background to help get the vibe right. It's so stupid. As you can see, there are just so many use cases for this device that it's mind-blowing to me, like genuinely. And I think there's always been that gap in retro emulation with the DS and the 3DS, that now filling that void and then giving us access to everything at the same exact time is what's truly just making me go a little bit insane in the middle of recording this video. Okay, straight up, I just gotta say it, 3DS and DS emulation cannot outweigh original hardware. Unless we get some type of analog pocket version of a 3DS and a DS that uses actual cartridges and has a resistive touchscreen on the bottom, it's just not going to hit the exact same. And I don't think there's too much of a problem with that, because the Thor is aiming to do so much more alongside that emulation. The way I see it is that you have to sacrifice some of the original hardware's polish, where everything just kind of works and it flows together and it's as smooth as possible, 100% as intended. And as a result from that sacrifice, you get the huge variety of playing things like your Steam games, other retro consoles, and just using Android to watch YouTube and rot your brain away. Depending on your needs and your desires for replicating original hardware, I think that the AYN Thor and now the upcoming Anbernic DS, if that thing provides, you know, even an ounce of quality, is going to pass the threshold of what we would say is acceptable and a really great option if you don't want to play on original hardware and are looking to emulate dual screen games. Okay, wait, as I'm editing this video, the specs for the DS model have been released, and I am pretty disappointed. They're actually really underpowered compared to what I was anticipating. And then on top of that, the screen resolution doesn't provide for the most proper integer scaling for DS games, so you're gonna have to use a shader in RetroArch, but most of us use Melon DS to emulate games anyway on dual screen, so it's just kind of turning into a bit of a mess, and this is definitely more of a question mark than what I was previously hoping for out of a DS device. But I'll make a video on this thing. I don't want to go on too much of a tangent. We can get back to the beautiful Thor. I've had such a fun time setting this thing up and making it look all pretty, and I might even make an extra video just diving deep on how I've configured all of this AYN Thor dual screen goodness. If you want to see a video like that, drop a like on this one. It really helps me out. Like, the support you guys have been giving me has been insane lately. So everybody who's been liking, commenting, I try to read everything. I'm so appreciative of all the new people in here. And just again, I want to say thank you to anybody who decides to watch these videos. I want to conclude with just an anti-consumerism ad. Like, you don't have to buy the new shiny thing. It's always going to be around the corner. Like, even this AYN Thor might be and feel outdated in a year or two when we get the next amazing dual screen device. So you could dust off your old hardware. You can look at your phone and try to do emulation on that thing. You can look at the technology that you already do own, because odds are you've got everything that you need in your room. That being said, though, if you grew up with the DS and the 3DS, this thing's pretty shiny.
You know that it takes two if we tango. Everybody fake too, a fake halo. Tell me how to break through with my aim low. I might get a beach view if I'm shallow. You know that it takes two.